tell my children that when we were growing up, there were these clunky black telephones in which you had to dial them and then they came back. And when you tell them that there was a world in which there were no cell phones, they cannot imagine it. Anyone who was born at the turn of this century cannot imagine a world in which there was no instant connectivity. And we're not talking about centuries ago. We're not talking about 50 years ago. We're talking about right now, like yesterday, when your child was born. When your child was born, it was impossible to imagine a world in which there would be a phone which would not have a cable. If there's no cable, then how does the voice go? And these are real questions. If you went back to the 1980s, 70s, and you said there'd be a phone which would not have a wire attached to it, you'd, at least for someone like myself, lame person like myself, you'd throw me off. And now exactly in that spirit, my children cannot imagine that actually there was a world in which people were not connected. So how did people speak? And people don't speak, people text. So how did people text? And that just tells you how discontinuous the world and the future is going to be. My father used to tell me that there was a time when there was no penicillin. And if you had infection and you fell sick, you died. If your body immunity kicked in, you survived. If it didn't kick in, you died. And then people thought penicillin was a miracle. Was it a miracle? Look at the kind of medications that you have right now. You're growing organs in Petri dishes. How can you grow organs in Petri dishes? Organs are supposed to be within humans or within organisms. How can you walk into a lab and grow an organ in a Petri dish? That's crazy. But that craziness has crept in. From death to penicillin, and penicillin to the kind of science that we're doing right now, it's like magic. And you can look at any number of things. You can think, could we have imagined? I could not have imagined that there'd be cars without fuels. How could there be cars without gasoline? Oh, I'm also the Minister of Petroleum, so I'm conflicted here. But seriously, even if I'm conflicted and you take it as a prejudicial view, think about cars without drivers. How could there be cars without drivers? How could there be cars without fuel? What the hell is going on? So no matter how you look at it from the telephony perspective, you look at it from the medical sciences perspective, you look at it from the automotives, mobility, connectivity perspective, you find only one thing. Future is anything but the linear projection of the present. So if all of these discontinuities have come about within the time frame in which your youngest or the oldest was born to date, which was just about yesterday, you got out of college, you got married, you went to the hospital, you pulled the kid out, you didn't know how to fit the car seat, and now look at them, and they tell you, you don't get me. And they're right. I truly don't get them. But they're not going to get it either. They are also not going to get it. And that's the genius of the future. So the future has to be built based upon something resilient. And that resilience is what we need right now. Resilience now for a future that we don't know jack about. Because that's what it is. People who are in, what year is this? What year is this, sir? 2024, 25, some year like that. People who are going to graduate now are going to retire in 45 years. We don't know what 5 years are going to look like. How are these kids going to figure out? And these are not the kids born now. Kids born now would retire in 65, 70 years. I'm talking about people who are graduating now. They're going to go on till, God knows, 40 more years, 2065, 75. We don't know what 2030 is going to look like. I'm just coming from the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and they have a vision 2030. We don't know what 35 is going to look like. And they're going to retire in 45 years. So our only hope in hell is to build resilience in our system. If you look at the present now, all of the things that I'm talking about, things that I've alluded to, they're primarily grounded in 4, 5, 6 platforms. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm exhaustive about them or I know these platforms. But it's very clear that biotechnology is going to change the way we think about life and death. And many people believe that death would be treated as a disease. I think, and I hope we'd be more graceful and gracious and let go. But having said that, there are scientists, there are people who believe that death is going to be negotiated in petri dishes. We are already kind of having designer babies. You can already do gene manipulation to have certain kind of attribute in your baby. That's already happening. So, very clearly, with this biotechnology, our sense of life, illness, death, all of it is going to get negotiated at some point in time. I'm not going to negotiate death because I'm a believer, but it's not very difficult for me to believe that if not my daughter, her children would live for much longer, maybe a couple of 100 years. Why not? Look at penicillin. It was 34 years, it's 70 years now. If it's 70 years now, why won't it be 140 years? And then why would it not be 200 years? It's only a matter of time, especially with the way the science is evolving. So the complexities that kind of aging would introduce, we'll have to deal with that complexity. Similarly, right now, what all you see in the way of miniaturization, in the way of convergence of technologies, is articulating itself in the way of nanotechnology. And that's happening. You already have these machines which are doing 3D printing and so on and so forth. So there's no rocket science there. These are things that are happening now. When you look at connectivity, you have these smart cities. I was in California, and you go there in California. I was in China, and no one carries any currency. There's no need for currency. Mobility. You're walking around with your bank account in your hands, you do this, and you're done. California is a little bit more advanced. You go there, and there's something out there, there's no person. You walk into a store, you pick something up, it charges your account.